Well, good morning. 11 years ago, I moved to Dundee, and I moved in order to help Signpost International, which was the organisation that I was a trustee of, to become a missional community. And I thought that was going to be a really simple process. As it turned out, we didn't end up becoming a missional community. I ended up starting a 24/7 house of prayer here in Dundee. And that lasted for quite a number of years, up until COVID. So my experience of Dundee has been that there are churches which are praying, there are churches which are growing, there are churches who are struggling. Since COVID, I started working with an organization called Cairn Movement. And Cairn Movement helps to encourage and train pioneers and church planters. So it's been fun to work with lots of people who are starting new projects, not all churches, some kingdom projects. And over this last year, Ken has done something called the listening project, listening exercise. So we've been around Scotland, we've listened to church leaders, and we've tried to discern what is God doing and what should we do about it? How can we join in? And the result of that is a report, written report called God is on the Move. So I want to kind of start there because God is on the move. We've heard some incredible stories. We heard a story of a church down in Biggar. Down, if you don't know, it's kind of towards England, south of Edinburgh. Tiny little place. And one morning, two guys turned up at church who'd been listening on the internet to some sort of God stuff, had got saved, and in listening to all this stuff, they'd come to the point where they realized that they needed to be baptized. So they turned up at this tiny little Church of Scotland church in Biggar and said, "Can you baptize us?" Amazing. Charlotte Chapel in Edinburgh had over 50 baptisms on Easter Sunday, over 50. We've seen over the past year people get healed, not in healing lines, but just because they've been sitting in the worship and lives get changed, radically changed. And this report kind of brings some of that stuff out, and it says, well, if that's what God is doing, and he's doing it in a gentle way, in a small way, then how do we join in, and how do we see God really shake the nation? And there are some keys. I think there's 5 or 6 of them. But one of the keys is this, that the church needs to be a praying church. So that kind of brings us all the way back, full circle to setting up that 24/7 community. Because I didn't intend to set up a prayer community at all. I was about mission and getting out there and sharing the good news so that people's lives can be changed and people can kind of enter into that joyful experience instead of just struggling. But I was at a meeting and God kind of hijacked me, so, as he does. So he said, and it was an almost audible voice, he said, if you want to build a community that's built around a rhythm of prayer, start with prayer. So that's what we did. And in those years of kind of looking at prayer and trying to discern what prayer is and how we can get involved, I learned more about prayer in the last 10 years than I did in the previous 40. Seriously. But prayer is one of those things that's it's like nailing jelly to the wall. We can't really kind of define what it is, because it's not one thing. It's a whole relationship with God. So in order to kind of help us about prayer, I thought what we'd do today is we'd look at 3 people in the Bible, and we'd look at how they prayed. So prayer postures. Now, these people, they're not perfect people, they're not special people, but they are very important people. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And each has a different kind of way of praying. So if we can start with Abraham. Abraham, the father of the faith, of all faiths, all the major faiths in the world. God kind of ambushes him. So he's there minding his own business, and God says, I'm going to make you a great nation, and I'm going to give you this land, and you need to travel. Off you go, and I'll go to the land I'm going to show you. So Abraham starts off. He goes as far as Haran with his father and his family, and then eventually he gets a little bit further. He gets distracted and goes down to Egypt and comes back out. But towards the end of his life, there's this story we get in Genesis chapter 18. So he's had these promises for a number of years. And it says, the Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing by, and when he saw them, he hurried from the entrance to his tent to meet them and bowed down low to the ground. And he offers them hospitality. He kills, I don't know if it's a lamb or a calf. He feeds them, has a great time. And as they go, he realizes that actually they're not just ordinary people, but they're angels, which is quite unexpected, quite unusual. And these angels repeat a promise to him that he's going to have a son and he's going to be a great nation, and that his wife, Sarah, who's quite old by this stage, is going to have a baby. And the story goes that Sarah was listening, and she was just so amazed or confused by this promise that she laughed. So the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I'm old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son. When the men got up to leave, they looked down towards Sodom. So the backstory is that Abraham's nephew Lot had gone to live in this town of Sodom. And Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. Then the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him, for I've chosen him so that he will direct his children in his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. So the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he promised him. Then the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin so grievous, I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that's reached me. If not, I will know. The men turned away and went towards Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Now, I don't know what you do after a party, what you do when you've had guests in your house. For me, I just kind of, I'm an introvert, so I'm not energized by people at all. And I just want to take that time and chill. I might want to kind of tidy up the house, make sure that the washing up gets done or whatever. Abraham doesn't do any of those things. Abraham stands before the Lord. This is his posture of prayer. And as he stands before the Lord, he kind of has this conversation with God, which is one of the most difficult conversations that you can get hold of in the Bible. So the angels, we've now worked out they're angels. They've gone down to have a look at Sodom to see if what they have heard, which will be Lot's prayers. Lot's ended up in a city that's quite evil, and Lot's a just man, and he's, this is bad. So God's heard this. He sends the angels to investigate. And Abraham says to God, hang on, God, if you're going to destroy this city, are you really going to destroy a city with righteous people in it? Are you going to destroy the innocent with the guilty? Is that something that a God who's the judge of all the earth is going to do? Is that right? Would you actually destroy the city if 50 righteous people are in it? And this conversation kind of goes on, and God says, no, I won't destroy the city if I find 50 righteous people, and then it's 45 people, and then it's 30 people, and then it's 35 people, and then it's 20 people. And eventually, after this kind of bargaining with God, he gets down to 10. He's not going to destroy the city if there are 10 righteous people in it. And I guess Abraham's kind of sweating a bit and thinking, is Lot and his family, are there 10 righteous people in that household group? Is he safe now? Now, how does he pray like that? How can Abraham have the audacity to argue with God about how just and how righteous he is? It's outrageous. Isn't it? It's just crazy. And the reason why God can answer Abraham's prayers and Abraham can pray like that is because of this prayer posture. He stands before God. He's not rushing away. He's not doing any of the things, that anybody else would think that they need to do. He's waiting in God's presence. And I think that tells us that he knows who he is. He knows his identity as somebody chosen by God, as we would say in the New Testament, as somebody adopted by God, somebody who's saved, somebody who's been brought into that family and has been born again, been born into the family of God. Because it's only children that can argue with their parents like that, right? How many of you are parents? Stick your hands up. Let's see. Most of you. So you know what pester power is all about. You know what it's like when your child wants something and just won't stop. That's what we see there in that posture, don't we? Somebody who is so confident that they know God that they can argue with him. Now, remember, this is Abraham. He's spent, 60 years by this time, having been promised something that hadn't arrived, having been promised that he would have a great family, that he would have a child, that he would be given a land. None of that had happened yet. But even though he hadn't seen the promises of God, he knew God. And he knew that God was just. And just in case you haven't already read the story, just so you know, God did destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, but he got Lot and his family out first. So that is the posture of Abraham. A posture of a child with a father, a posture of somebody who knows the character and the person of God. A child who just hangs about with dad rather than going off to do those other things that are so important, like watch the match or commiserate with those who've lost the match or whatever it is that they're doing. Abraham. So let's turn on a couple of chapters to Isaac. Now, in the story of Isaac, it's a horrible story. Isaac is this child who is born of Abraham's old age, and very early in his life, his dad takes him up a mountain to sacrifice him to God. Now, I don't know if that would traumatize you, but I suspect that Isaac had some trauma that he had to deal with that. He got married. He didn't go and find a wife and fall in love and get married. His servant went out and found somebody who was of the right tribe and came back, and he got married. And it worked out well. She was a beautiful lady and great character, and he loved her. But she couldn't have children. And as the years rolled on, this was like a repeat of the story of Abraham. He got older, she got older, and eventually he prayed, and she did she got pregnant. And it was a difficult pregnancy. There were twins, and when the twins were born, they were already fighting each other. Isaac had all of that, and yet he was the child of promise. He inherited all of the promises that Abraham had been given. And he got older and older, and he didn't see any of these promises coming true either. And eventually what happens is that the enmity between these two sons ended up with Jacob cheating Esau, who was the older child, out of his blessing and having to run away. We'll come to that in a bit. But here's Isaac at the end of his life. He's getting blind. He's had all these traumatic experiences. He is the favorite child, and he is blessed. And whatever he does, he's still blessed, although he's carrying all of these scars and hurts and difficulties. So we'll pick up the story in Genesis 26. Now there was a famine in the land, beside the earlier famine of Abraham's time, and Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar. The Lord appeared to Isaac and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land where I tell you to live. Stay in this land for a while, for I will be with you and I will bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give all the lands and will confirm the oath I swore to your father Abraham." Skip on a few verses. Isaac planted crops in that land, and the same year reaped 100-fold because the Lord blessed him. The man became rich, and his wealth continued to grow until he became very wealthy. When Jesus tells the story of seed falling into the ground, and there's 3 types of ground that the seed doesn't grow in, but the good soil yields 30 or 60 or 100-fold. And Isaac was already on 100-fold. So he's God's blessing him. Whatever he does, God's blessing him. So he had so many flocks and herds and servants that the Philistines envied him. So all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the time of his father Abraham, the Philistines stopped up, filling them with earth. Now, any of you been in a neighbor dispute, argued about a fence or about a tree overhanging or about noisy neighbors or about a roof that leaks or whatever? Any of you? I mean, this is serious. He's keeping sheep in, the Middle East. They need water. So he digs wells so they can get water, and the Philistines don't like, they're jealous of him. They don't like the fact that God's blessing him, so they come and they stop up those wells. what would you do? What would you do? Yeah, you could dig them open again and then fill them up again, and then that would just pray. Yeah, that's good. What would you pray? Would you pray that I've been given these promises, God, you've got to come through on these promises. You can't let these people stop up my wells. Would you get really kind of bullshit and warfare-y in your prayer? Yeah, probably I would. Isaac doesn't do that. Abimelech said to Isaac, move away from us because you've become too powerful for us. So Isaac moved away from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. Isaac reopened the wells that had been dug in the time of his father Abraham, which the Philistines had stopped up after Abraham died, and gave them the same names his father had given them. Isaac's servants dug in the valley and discovered a well of fresh water there. Hooray! He's solved the problem. He's moved away, and he's dug a fresh well, and all is good, right? Wrong. The herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen and said, this water is ours. So he named the well Esek because they disputed with him. Then he dug another well, and they quarreled over that one also, and he named it Sitnah. And then he moved on from there and dug another well, and no one quarreled over it, so he named it Rehoboth, saying, the Lord has given us room, and we will flourish in the land. You see, Isaac, maybe the trauma made him run away from conflict. Yeah? I mean, we can kind of put a psychology veneer on it, if you like. But Isaac basically knew that he was blessed. And he'd read or listened to the stories of that first promise to Abraham. I've chosen you. I'm going to make you a great people. You're going to be blessed and a blessing to all nations. And Isaac's attitude, his posture of prayer was that he carried blessing. So he wasn't there to condemn people, to stop people, to pray against stuff. He just blessed them. Listen, we've dug the well. It's great water. You have it. I'll move on. His posture of prayer was to bless other people. And one of the tragedies of the church is that that's not the posture that we kind of jump to. We find somebody who disagrees with us, whether it's morally or philosophically or theologically, and we want to condemn them, and we want to make sure they're shut down. And God, would you stop them doing this? And God, would you stop that? And would you cause them? That's not the posture that we find here. Isaac just blesses them because he knows he's been blessed to 100-fold when he plants crops. And he wants to be a blessing. He wants to take that blessing on. One of the other movements that's grown up in recent years is the local houses of prayer that have come from the house of prayer in Wales, where God's really moved. And their whole philosophy is we want to bless the community. We want to encourage the community. We want this community to be a blessing. And in Scotland, their coordinator is a guy called Ian Sutherland. And he was telling me, he now lives on Lindisfarne, but he used to live near Rosyth. And he said, we used to prayer walk around, and there was this shop that was doing like witchcraft and tarot and all that sort of thing. And I mean, you and I probably would be praying for it to close down, right? Because that's our natural tendency. He said, I didn't do that. I just, whenever I went past, I prayed for them. I prayed blessing on them. I prayed for the people that worked there, that God would bless them and bring them to a spacious place and encourage them. And the shop did close down. And the people did move on that worked there to having, gracious opportunities and spacious places. It's so much more appropriate to pray blessing than to just want to stop and close things down. That's Isaac's posture of prayer. At the end of the story, actually, Abimelech, the Philistine, and if you read further in the story, you know that the Israelites and the Philistines they were at war quite a lot. That's kind of the David and Goliath story and other stories. But Abimelech had come to him from Gerar. And Isaac said, why have you come to me, since you were hostile to me and sent me away? And they said, we saw clearly that the Lord was with you. So we said there ought to be a sworn agreement between us and you. Let's make a treaty with you that you will do us no harm, just as we did not molest you, but always treated you well. Maybe. And sent you away in peace. And now you are blessed by the Lord. So Isaac made a feast for them. And they ate and drank, and early the next morning the men swore an oath to each other, and Isaac sent them on their way, and they left him in peace. Isaac was the peacemaker. And then the great verse is the next one. That day, Isaac's servant came and told them about the well they had dug, and said, we found water. And they called it Sheba. You see, if you're somebody whose attitude is to give away blessing, you find blessing. You find the water. You find the New Testament would call it the flow of the Holy Spirit bubbling up inside you to give away. And if you're not giving it away in blessing, water gets stagnant. It's not very nice. So Isaac's posture of prayer is to dig. Let's go on to Jacob. Honestly, these three people, they get worse as the generations go. So Jacob starts by being the younger twin. I won't ask if any of you are twins. And there's this conflict between him and Esau. And as I said, he cheats Esau out of his right as the firstborn to kind of get the big blessing. And he has to run away. And he runs away. And as he runs away, God meets with him. So he lies down and he has a rock for a pillow. No, I've never tried it. I wouldn't advise you to try it, but that's what he does. And as he sleeps, he gets this dream, this vision of a ladder going up to heaven, up and down, and angels coming up and down on it. And he wakes up in the morning and he says, wow, God's in this place and I was not aware of it. And remember, he's this son. He's carrying, in fact, he's cheated Esau out of it, so he knows he's carrying this blessing. This blessing that makes Abraham and Isaac so prosperous, but he doesn't believe it. So he goes and he marries, I think it's his cousin, and he's trying to get the most out of his uncle. And he cheats him so often, and he comes up with this weird kind of thing to make the sheep breed so his flock gets bigger than his uncle's flock. And all the way through, he's kind of, I know I'm blessed, but I don't feel blessed. So I've got to make it happen. I've got to do something to make this happen. And God blesses him anyway. He has this weird sheep breeding. Any of you shepherds in here? Probably not. But he has this weird sheep breeding thing that actually, that he takes bark from the willows, is it some sort of sticks, and he sticks these bark sticks, oh, that's a tongue twister, in front of the watering hole, so that when the sheep breed, they'd come out speckled and mottled. I cannot explain the scientific rationale behind that, but this is Jacob's head. He's doing everything he can in order to cheat and become what he wants. He's self-absorbed, and his name actually means trickster. And he was a trickster. So he eventually winds Laban up so much that he has to run away. And he goes back, and he's retreating from an uncle that he's cheated, and he's going back to the brother that he's cheated, and he's kind of, this is not a good place for him. We'll pick the story up. So he's about to enter the land, and what he does first is he makes sure that he kind of divides all the stuff that he's carrying, all his animals, all his flocks, into little groups, and he sends them on ahead. Perhaps because he thinks that if Esau's going to attack him, then one of the groups is going to, escape or whatever. This is Genesis 32, verse 22. That night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, 2 maidservants, 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He sent them across the stream. He sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. And the man said, "Let me go, for it's daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What's your name?" "Jacob," he answered. And the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." And he replied, "Why do you want my name?" And he blessed him there. Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It's because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. And he meets his brother, and his brother's not angry, and that's great. But here in this story, we get the third posture of prayer, the posture of wrestling. What Jacob does in that night is so significant. Firstly, he divests himself of all his possessions, everything that holds him. Because actually possessions, so often we don't possess them, they possess us. And once we've got it, it's like, how do I hold on to this? How do I keep this? How do I protect this? So he'd got rid of all of that. And then he met this man, this God, and he wrestles with him. He comes face to face with himself. He's got nowhere else to run. And in that night, he is broken. The rest of his life, he limps. He lays down his own agenda and his own insistencies and his own plans. And he allows God to take charge. And it's really interesting, if you read through the whole of Jacob's story, up until that point, it's like Jacob went here, Jacob did this, Jacob went there. After that, and God said to Jacob, and he went. He was broken. His will was submitted to God. And he went on, as you know, to be the patriarch of the 12 tribes of Israel. And on his deathbed, he blessed them, and off they went. 3 postures of prayer. Now, we can learn so much from them. They're not perfect. Abraham didn't see the promises that he wrestled with God for. He saw Isaac, but he didn't see them dwelling in the land. Isaac, he did get a place where he was prosperous, and there was a well and there was water, and he could settle. But actually, his life wasn't simple or in any way. And even though he'd avoided that conflict and he'd blessed the Philistines, they went on to be a real problem for Israel. And Jacob, of course, limped. There was a physical marking of him that he'd wrestled with God. So I'm not saying that by turning to these postures of prayer that everything's going to be fine. But I am saying, and this report says, actually, if we want to see God move as we've begun to see him move, and if we want to see that, we've seen something, it's not everything, it's something. If we want to see the everything, then we need to be a people of prayer. We need to know our identity so that we can stand before God. We need to bless other people. We'll leave our sometimes stupid arguments beside. Let them go and work with other people. Bless them. Be kingdom people, not just church people. And we need, above all, to wrestle with God so that our will is broken and that he has the first and the last command over our lives. Let's pray, and then the worship group is going to come back up again. God, we just want to thank you. We thank you that you are on the move. We thank you for every sign that we see, every evidence of your grace, every life that is changed, every person that is set free, every broken heart that is healed, every broken body that is healed. But we want to see more. Will you teach us how to pray in these postures, knowing who we are, being willing to embrace others, and being willing to lay down our own agendas so that you have your way in the church and in our lives. Amen.